So welcome. In this video, I'm going to talk about my head construction method and how I use it to change and modify for different types of characters. In this video, I'm going to look at a likeness more for female versus male. I pulled out a couple exaggerated examples in terms of differences. For points, you can push, pull, exaggerate to create a different style or look to your people or characters. Now, what would be opportunities to play with that or to play with making some changes to the lay-in? And we'll start to illustrate that by looking at male versus female differences. First example here with Audrey Hepburn would be, I think, just approaching the female skull, the less, the better, right? Especially at a younger age. I don't want a lot of bony protrusions and prominent areas of bone that are glaring and standing out in the drawing. In terms of the basic molding of the head construction itself, you don't have to always obey the sphere. So maybe to get early likeness and trying to make the forehead a little bit straighter, right? That was the difference between male and female, was the lean of the plane of the forehead. And that could start as early as this, kind of shaping the ball, or it could be even earlier in the way that maybe you soften the jaw, right? So we're gonna have less of an angle difference between mandible and the back of the jaw there. So maybe even approaching that with a slightly softer sweep earlier on sets you up for that difference in terms of type. Here's my proportions. When I'm looking now for the step after proportions, we start laying in our side plane. The temple, those aren't obvious now. It's not as clear to me, or hairline. So maybe I just do that really lightly. And not every part of the construction needs to be demarcated and super dark and really obvious ways. But a difference in the jaw structure of male and female would be that there's a greater angle here. We could think of this kind of on a scale, maybe for a masculine type, it would move out that way more, broadening the jaw. And even when I'm going through the process of laying in a head, I'll still, after I get the whole thing constructed, I still might come back and shift things around and play with things. It doesn't have to be that it's an exact science, or that you have to nail it with one line. That's not a product drawing. It's really pretty faint, the evidence of cheek in the face, and that would be because of that really high, smooth surface of the malar fat covering. So maybe I just push this line up and keep it really faint so it doesn't overtake the drawing itself. In terms of working through the brow, I would want much of this or all of this to also feel less commanding, so more understated. I don't want the brow to be that really aggressive folding of planes. I would rather try to create something that lightly gives me an understanding of corner, but could also suggest or keep a suggestion of subtlety through the idea that there's fat up here and that the skull itself at this point is going to be pretty well covered over. So maybe the eyebrow would be a nice way of just suggesting that turn, a little bit of a turn to the forehead or temple. I'm not building out the massive kind of roll of the cheek or of the brow ridge, right? This is not getting built out with a big cylinder or anything like that. So here would be my eye. Maybe I'll just loop it around so that we get that inner plane or that inner look. So I would try to keep this a little bit higher. I would understate the temple. I would try to keep the forehead a bit more vertical. My lack of information in this area is to allow for that softer area of roof fat. I don't want to hit a bunch of information there around the idea of a temple. Maybe even my lash is going to do most of the heavy lifting for the structure of the eye, just moving that line or that wrapping line around instead of setting up those aggressive architectural planes for the tarsus plates. Right? So maybe just something like this is enough in this case. So outside of just skull differences, the technical or the practical application of drawing for the female face or head construction in this instance would be stating less, right? Trying to do more with less, keeping subtlety right at the forefront. On this side, we'd have the same. So just place that eye back in here and do my same nose structure. Right, so let's lay this in lightly and then see if what we can get out of the structure of the nose. So that comes back here. Here's our basic box form. Here's an underplane. And so what we'll be looking at in this might be, everybody's nose is going to be unique, but maybe just a slight bump, come out to the tip of the nose. Here's the turn. The difference in skull structure would be that stereotypically women can have a slightly more narrow or heart-shaped nasal aperture. That might impact the nose by the description of its width or the look of its width ultimately. But in terms of the drawing or the overall, maybe I just keep it subtle, less angle. You could even think of it in that sense. Less straights, more curves could be a nice way to build a kind of a passive quality around the feeling of something that might be more feminine. The malar fat I'm also thinking about is a little bit higher and fuller. So the way that form reads in some of these areas would be more concealing or concealed of the skull. Mouth, let's say in our shape. So that's the underplane of the nose and its connection to the head with the cartilage. I can give that, overdid that lash a little bit so we can pick that up. And then for the denture sphere, and then chin. So especially with the chin, I'm going to change that to be even more kind of passive or softer in that movement back. Maybe even pull this up a bit and just kind of every pass I go through the drawing, maybe we make a little bit of a correction. So by the time that we get down the first pass, we have one stage and then it's ready for the next stage or development. So now at this stage, maybe we feel good about going into the lips. Maybe we'd keep these a little bit more full. That same thing, we're going to wrap this around, thinking about my M and my W. Maybe we could drop that just a little bit more. Pull that here. So I would be looking to maybe understate that big drop of that philtrum, maybe heighten the curve of the M and this kind of more classic Hollywood look for the female face. And then what is this just kind of gives me that nice read of the plane pushing out and then back. Here's that node at the end of the mouth. And then lower lip doing the same, coming forward, back. Here's our W underneath and the wrap of that lip back up. Kind of that area of the buccal fat, just making that notation there through that little mass or circle. I could probably even move that chin up a little bit more. So look from my lay-in to my second pass, as I start to customize for likeness, it's okay to make changes and corrections. And so that's going to be thinking about where that underplane would sit. That's part of achieving or kind of working towards a likeness or the development of an idea for me, is that it's going to take different versions and the progression towards the final might look different than the beginning. The reason I like kind of working with an approach that allows me to be more process oriented is I can make corrections and mistakes along the way. Here's I rethink the eyes up here, get the brow on this side, even start to think about a little addition of some shadow to push that eye back on that side. And then it's always nice to maybe put on a hair shape too. So again, just thinking of some kind of hat. Right, what would be a plastic hat that you could wrap and kind of ornament the shape of the head with around. We'd have this going back. I can see that part here, that might work as a nice wrapping line. For hair, I'm also kind of along the way thinking about what its structure would be too. You don't have to, but that helps me keep an idea of what the form of that shape might be. This clearly has a wrap with the side of the skull as it turns. And then as soon as it hits my temple, that shape of the hair kind of changes. So it comes out, goes back, and becomes that type of shape at the sideburn area. And then we also have this ball bun at the back. And then maybe kind of readdress the nose. But I'm mostly just all the way through trying to keep a curved or a softer curve with less architecture for the overall of the skull. Big points that I would be aware of in terms of structural differences, angle of the jaw, width of the jaw, angle of the chin, right, that recessive angle back this way. Trying to keep the chin from being overly squared, right? So making sure that feels rounded or withdrawn or curved back. The brow being less heavy, and thinking more of the forehead as that slightly more vertical plane. And so that would be my quick and dirty view of that, kind of thinking about the adjustments made for head construction. In contrast, we could look at a much more different face, which might highlight the qualities, really exaggerated qualities of more of a masculine skull. So here could be our same setup. And just to really push that difference in terms of contrast. So, what if I started my jaw? Would it make sense to start the jaw like we normally would, like this, and then build out? Might be worth trying just for fun. Let's see if we could just set it up as we normally would our basic skull. So here's our 3/4 version, the rotated head. Here's our neck. Here's a little bit of an underplane. I can really see a very clear temple, unlike the last. Proportions, thirds, split, quarters for that side plane. Here's my ear, and then jaw. Now if we start to take a closer look at this sensor here, look how much straighter that is, how much broader, how much more of a projection there is to the chin itself, right? Having that really exaggerated forward plane or stair step that we talked about for the difference in male and female. Maybe the cheekbone could be a little lower, more angular, right? Whereas in the one above, I focus more on a larger curve or a sweeping curve. Maybe this one we just use the language of straights to set this face up. And what's happening on this side, we could just mirror that across and put some straights here. Here's the socket. So let's look now at that area of the keystone. So look at different angle. So maybe the forehead angle is more reclined, more diagonal. So you can start to shave into our skull with that. Look at the development of the brow, how that's so much more exaggerated than the one that we looked at above. You really get that push of this shape. You really come in here and have a lot of fun thinking about the different surface changes as that rolls back. Something that really wouldn't help our cause above in terms of getting a quick buildup of a head construction that might suggest that difference. And then keystone, and here, nose. Nasal saddle looks pretty thin, but then the development into its structure for that boxy area is much wider, right, than I think that we observed in the female face above. So that might just be bigger, maybe the result of a larger nasal aperture. So maybe our box in this one is just much more broad, but it still drops to the same points. It's just communicating out to a wider position. Eyes feel small, so this is maybe a result of so much development of bone around. This would be my temple, and then the overlap of that cheek behind. Here's the socket on this side, placement for the eye, and then mouth. What am I focusing on for different attributes in this one? Widening the cheek, broadening the jaw, and moving the angle of the jaw closer to vertical, trying to bring the cheek a little lower in terms of that big suggested or thrown rhythm. I think that if we were to draw the bone of the cheek more directly, it would be maybe a little larger. We could also do that. Think about the size here. So this would be a common area for men that gets wider. Right? That's why I'm kind of making my curve lower to suggest that wider positioning for the cheek or the width of that cheekbone ridge. And then here would be my denture sphere, my mouth. So even without a lot of detail or ornamentation on top, I think you can still feel the fundamentals are different for each. Right? Without kind of going into the wrap of the eye socket or the placement of the lips. It's a different head. It's a different character at that sense, or at that stage even. So if we start to go in and put the lips on, kind of feel like at this stage, the individual features are important, but not as important as the way that the head construction was used to modify the beginning. Because the features are just going to describe a specific quality within that big framing. So here with the turn in the nose and the change or the cut for the nostril. It's not that that isn't important, it certainly is, and it's fun to do, but it doesn't change the fact, right? It doesn't reallocate an understanding of character from that big organization of the head. And then look at the crazy development of the chin here. So we're really getting that push around. So while the one above, another way to think about it is a downplay or a de-emphasis on the underlying structure and skull, right, in order to celebrate kind of a softer or more understated look or representation. This would be the counter or the opposite. Right? For the male, I'm really trying to play up, like even accelerate the ideas of construction and skull around the kind of the arrows, right? Cheek, jaw, forehead. We talked about the superciliary arch as an important area of difference. Or even being able to see the temple, that's different because there's maybe we could think of there being less of that roof fat in this area, or maybe the cheekbones under the eye feel more prominent. And I understand that it's not a super fair comparison because there's differences in age here, there's difference in ethnicity here. So what I'm pointing towards more is the general idea of how you can use the head construction to push and morph in different directions, while using the ideas of gender in the skull as a governing and an emphasis or push to give some different results to what can feel like that kind of more clinical or robotic average.
That makes me think of Handsome Squidward. Have you seen that?
Yeah.